just to level set this, yes, Matt and I have known each other for a while. Yes, I agreed to do this ages ago. That's his out on this. And I wasn't really paying attention when I agreed to do this. Then when the date got closer and closer, he said, yeah, remember when you said you were going to do a little thing for me? I was like, yeah. And then yesterday, the day before, he said, so you're doing that thing? Oh, okay. So if it's not entirely polished, that's just the way it's going to be today. You can come and talk to me afterwards if there's anything you want to get me to expand upon. But again, to level set, I'm a developer getting into ops, so I'm more of the dev of the DevOps. And this is sort of my experience with using Docker and just some bits and pieces that I've come across in the past, I'd say the past 8 months, year, we've been using it seriously in a project. So here we go. We can skip that. Yep, that's me. So I'm development lead at Hydraulics Visual Effects. If you saw buildings fall down in San Andreas, that was us. If you saw The Rock with no bags under his eyes, that was us. His 5 o'clock shadow was absolutely perfect. Guys, don't stress about it. That's just us. It's amazing the stuff that they do. I used to work for Boeing. So to go from airplane stuff and XML and Java to Node and MongoDB and things exploding on people's screens has actually been pretty cool. Okay, so for devs, Docker means, and I'm not speaking for all devs, but just the folks that I work with, portable modular design. You start to think about things in terms of pieces that communicate with other pieces. This no more working on my machine. I know ops, you probably dread that when a developer says, you know, please deploy this thing I've made and I've installed all sorts of random bits and pieces and somehow it works, but you know, good luck with that. Here it is, I'm going home. We suffer through that as well, and I've been on teams where we've had those types of issues. And more configuration management, and by that I mean more than zero. So developers, typically, I've worked in places where we would do it and then we'd throw it over the fence to ops or to CM, and they would come back to us and ask us questions, but generally they had the ball and they were working it out. So, you know, those days are over, thank goodness. So we're slowly but surely learning more of that. So like I said, Docker is like Legos. It supports modular architectures. What do I mean by modules? I'm a dev lead. I'm not a software architect, but I do some architecture just on the side of my desk. For me, a module is something that sends, receives, or processes messages. It's about messages. The advantages for me, anyways, of the system that we're working on right now, which I can't talk about. I was going to make some Facebook jokes. Mike, I saw one of your compatriots at a data visualization when he was showing Snorkel. And it was so awesome because he was like, Snorkel, it does all these amazing things. And here's the next slide. There was all these black redacted boxes over everything because legal had gone through his presentation and said, yeah, you can't talk about that. So we essentially got the name, Snorkel. Apparently it's really awesome. So.
Scuba.
Is it scuba? Well, okay. Well, whatever. Anyways, it was redacted. So we're working on some stuff. We're using a lot of Docker containers that are talking to each other. We use Docker Compose to orchestrate those containers. But one of the cool things that we're finding out now is that if we're not quite ready to build the next piece of our architecture, we just do like a really, you know, baby dummy sort of version of that thing, and then we start to build that out as we do it. So it's not only helping us with deployment, but it's helping us in development because we can decide the order that we build things, and as long as we're really clear about what messaging that thing has to satisfy, we can build out a baby version and work our way up. And the same thing when we get into staging or maybe even to deployment, we can watch pieces of our architecture and see which bits get really busy, and we can just decide we want to scale those bits out. So there's lots of benefits, and again, you've probably heard some of that stuff. Again, Docker do's. These are good ones for me, and again, encourage your devs to check this stuff out. The Docker client, I know it's in beta. I know it crashes a lot. Sometimes it sucks when your Mac goes to sleep. Upgrade your operating system, the latest OS 10. It's quite easy. It just makes everything, it maps everything to localhost. It allows you to orchestrate stuff with Docker Compose. It's really good. Just use it. It's a good way to get your devs to get on the Docker bandwagon and just start using it because it's very accessible. And it has a cool little whale that sits in your taskbar and animates and stuff like that, which is always good, right? Use Docker Hub to manage your images. If you use Git or Bitbucket or whatever to do source control, then you should be using Docker Hub to manage your images. It just makes sense. It's easy. Use standardized base images. What I mean by that is that any image that you can get off of Docker, if it's not an approved image, it's usually somebody's image that they based on something like some Debian distro or whatever. But the point is that if you have multiple images in your organization that you're managing, you should be looking at what's the commonalities. Build out a base image and then build all your other images on that base image. And that way, ideally, when you're troubleshooting stuff, you have a pretty consistent base to work from. Automated builds, again, Docker Hub. Just use it. Saves you loads and loads of time, especially if you have a good Git workflow. If you do stuff like build out a release candidate branch, put that back, merge that back into development, merge that back into master. You can have triggers when development gets updated or when master gets updated that you trigger an automated build. You shut down your staging server, you start your staging server, and you're deployed. It's pretty nice. And again, when I talked about base images, you can set up in Docker Hub links to your base images. So if your base images ever change, it can trigger a build for all your other images that are based on your base images. It's just another way to take advantage of all this stuff. And again, this is so easy, even your devs can do it. So again, this is something else that I can make jokes about that. I'm a dev, so. Cheat sheet. Again, if lots of folks are using Docker, probably these are pretty straightforward. The one that I use a lot is the second last and the last one, execing in to shell in. So if you just need to see what the heck's going on in a running container, this is a handy little one. Essentially, you're just in a running container, you're just executing bash, and then you're in. The last one is, this was an interesting gotcha. Typically, when you're running Docker and it's a running container, you're running as root. But you can, if you want to, you can set up your images where you create users, and you can just do that as part of your build, right? So when you're running, you're not running as root. So you shell in, the second from the bottom, and you're not root, and you can't do stuff. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought I owned this image. What's going on? So you just go in, and you set the -u to 0, and that sets you as the root user, and then you're shelled in, and you can do whatever you like. So save you a little bit of time. Gotchas. I don't know how many of you are using Docker Compose or Docker Compose v2. Is anybody using that for any of their stuff? All right, loads of people, cool. So one of the things you can do with Docker Compose is essentially just orchestration of containers. Start up all these images, get them running. Here's the relationships between them. And this little snippet that I have right here, all this is saying is that we have two services. We've got a database and we've got a server. The server's on port 80, and it depends on the database. So that last little bit there, I was all excited, because that's one of the new things with version 2 of Docker Compose, is that you can do that. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. That way our server is going to wait until our database is started up, which is a good thing, right? It doesn't work. What it does, after you read through the docs, is that it waits for that container to start. That doesn't mean that any particular process or port or anything is active or responding or listening or doing anything. So you actually have to do extra stuff to make sure that if this container needs to hit 27017, that you have to do extra stuff. So extra stuff. We use something called wait for it. It's a little shell script after hunting around on the interwebs. I just had to put down Vishnu Bob because that's the best GitHub name ever. And he wrote a little shell script that you can include in your Docker Compose file. You can hit me up if you want to see the actual code. And all it does is really it just starts up that container, and it checks. And it just checks if the database service is responding on that port. And once it is, then it starts up that image. So just handy thing that, Docker Compose is really nice for container orchestration, but it still doesn't take you to that final mile in terms of startup order and dependencies and stuff like that. Another gotcha. I thought I was being a clever lad when I wanted to pull in the Git hash for the version of the code that we're doing when we build the image. So this is actually image build, not container build. That's my bad. But there's two things to note here. This is, all I'm deciding to do is I'm grabbing something from the last Git log, and I just want to get that particular Git hash. And why do I want to do this is that if I want to shell in, whoops.
No worries, I'm just going to move this over here. So.
Okay. I'll just keep talking.
Sorry about us.
And
sure.
So this way we can shell in and we go, what the heck, what's going on? This is weird. Why do we have this version of this code deployed in this image? Oh, it's this one. Okay, cool. So, I did this in the Docker image file. And I thought, oh, this is great. We'll just have it there, and I'll just check the environment variable, and we're all good to go. Well, when you see the log in the image build, you see this. And step 14 just means there's just a bunch of steps when you see the image get built. And it says, oh, there you go. It's executing my command there. And then it says this little thing, and I've highlighted it just to be really clear about it. It's running in gobbledygook, whatever hash container. OK, cool. It executes that. Hey, it gives me exactly what I wanted. And then what does it say at the end here? Oh, we're removing it. Oh, this is an intermediate container. So when it's building out your image, it's doing a bunch of these things where they pop into existence, they execute something, and then they disappear. For a lot of this stuff, when you use command versus run, there are subtle differences between them, and I encourage you to look into that when you're setting up your images. So what this does is it actually executes this, sets this environment variable for this temporary ephemeral little process, and then it disappears. So later when you shell into this running container and you check, it's not there. There are actually people who've logged issues with Docker about this, and there's some debate about how they would actually enable you to set environment variables in this fashion when you're building images, but it's not a decided done thing. But anyways, to save you some time if you're trying to do this, find a different way of doing it. Killing processes. Again, you may find that you want to shell in and something's happened, but you don't want to kill the container. You want to go in there and sort of poke around and see what's going on. You might do something like this. So again, you're Docker execing in. You're going to shell into that running container. You might run one PS. Say it's an Express server, so you grep node. You get this back. You go, OK, that's the PID. OK, cool. I'm going to kill it. This is awesome, except for when your image doesn't have PS, except for when your image doesn't have kill, except for when your image doesn't have whatever. So again, this is a nod back to managing your base images. If you're in deploy or staging or in heavy development, you might want to have your base images that have a lot of stuff. So it's sort of a trendy thing you'll notice on Docker. How small can we make a running Linux container, And it's all about super teeny ones. But if they're super teeny, they won't have any of the stuff that you need to actually do some poking around and seeing what's going on. So if you want to do something that's a little more forensics, maybe have a different base container for your dev and your staging stuff. And if you're really worried about size and things like that, go for something really skinny for production. But just be aware that there are trade-offs when you do that kind of stuff. So I'm going to do a kumbaya moment here. So given that y'all are mostly DevOpsy folks, this is what I say to you to say to your devs. Get them to check out Docker Client. I'm dev lead for a small team. We have a front-end CSS person, and she's looking over my shoulder and going, oh, yeah, that's cool. So I could run everything if I just do this. And I said, yeah, you can run everything and just do this. So in 10 minutes, she was off to the races. And she's pretty technical for what I would call a CSS person. She actually likes JavaScript, so that's different than most CSS folks. But she's pretty well self-serve now. She just knows that, oh yeah, we need an update on those images. Boom, boom, boom. We're off to the races. And I know people have talked about this before, but I think it's really important for ops folks to get involved in the design phase. When people are talking about how they're going to develop an architecture or they're proposing an architecture to meet a business problem, it really would be good to have somebody in the room who's going, well, that sounds great, but how are you going to deploy that? How are you going to, when you get into maintenance or you get into operations, how are you going to deal with that? For me, the big takeaway is to understand how you can work with things that are messaging centric. And again, back to containers and things sending messages. And I find that that's really helped me in my design efforts. And again, sharing debugging tips and strategies. You folks are probably all Unix ninjas compared to lots of devs. There are some devs that I've worked with that are really good at programming, particularly 2 or 3 languages. But if you put the shell in front of them, they get all freaked out. So you got to sort of move them along a little bit. I found that my Unix gets better with practice. So you just find some folks that just need a little bit of help. And again, be patient, but share the config pane. If you're seeing something on your end which is just wacky, push back. It could easily be something that's a shortcoming in the design, or the devs just haven't even thought about it, or the architects haven't even thought about it.